Let's get right to my first reads of the morning. A bunch of new polls out this morning. Gives us our first real look at how last week's Supreme Court decision is being digested by the public and how it could be shaping new feelings about the president's health care law. The verdict, the court's ruling did give the president a minor boost. But is that shift in public opinion simply coming from Democrats whose soft support for the bill is now hardening? Unsurprisingly, in 3 new polls from the Kaiser Family Foundation, the Washington Post and ABC, and CNN, the public seems to be split right down the middle on the decision. Virtually tied in the CNN poll and Post polls, narrowly in favor in Kaiser's polls. But look at that. You see it is pretty intense. It's pretty much even on both sides. Support for the health care law itself has ticked up slightly. In Kaiser's poll, 41% have favorable views of the law, 41% oppose it. Support is up 4 points from May. Opposition number really not moving, as you see there. While still outnumbered by Republicans who strongly oppose the law, the proportion of Democrats who say they have a very favorable view of the law has jumped from 31% in May to 47% this month. It's an all-time high in Kaiser polling stretching back 2 years. So as you see, that jump is largely driven by self-described Democrats whose very favorable views of the law surged 19 points. Overall, though, Republicans are still more likely than Democrats to say the law will make them turn out to vote in November. 31% of Republicans say it will make them more likely to vote, compared to 18% of Democrats. The Washington Post ABC News poll gives us what amounts to a head-to-head on health care between the two presidentials. And on that one, the president comes out on top, while the president's approach to health care still has a 3-point net negative rating. 45% of Americans have a favorable view of his plans, 48% unfavorable. Romney's numbers are worse. He's underwater by 17 points. Just 30% of a favorable view of his approach. And the president has a 12-point advantage over Romney on health care among independents. Another number the White House has to be satisfied by: 56% think health care reform opponents should, quote, stop their efforts to block the law and move on to other problems, unquote. But while 82% of Democrats and 51% of independents say those opponents should just move on, only 26% of Republicans agree with that, setting up a potential messaging trap for the party. Finally, one more number for you. And this goes to the question of whether either presidential campaign is likely to let health care dominate when voters are so concerned about the economy. A full 41% of those polled by Kaiser were unaware that the Supreme Court had ruled on health care at all. All right, so what did I learn from these polls? Bottom line, you saw Democrats who may have been skeptical about this rally around the decision. That helped boost the number, help even it out. You saw no moving in the opposition number. When you look at all of these polls, the opposition number hasn't moved. That's been steady in somewhere in the low to mid 40s the entire time, depending on how different polling organizations ask the question. Very much dominated base Republicans, conservatives sitting in there. Most of the movement in the positive direction came from Democrats, with a few independents. But that head-to-head matchup on health care is fascinating, considering what our next story is about. So moving on to the clip that dominated the political news in the last 24 hours and muddied the waters for Republicans who want to make lemonade out of the lemon handed to them by the Supreme Court. So this was how Romney senior advisor Eric Fernstrom described the individual mandate to me on this show yesterday.
The governor believes that what we put in place in Massachusetts was a penalty, and he disagrees with the court's ruling that the mandate was a tax. But again,
so he agrees with the president, but he agrees with the president that it is not, and he believes that you shouldn't call the tax penalty a tax. You should call it a penalty or a fee or a fine.
That's correct.
So that simple answer to that straightforward question, a little convoluted as well, though, didn't just stray from the party's central message on the health care law. It contradicted it.
The Supreme Court, which has the final say, says it is a tax.
It's now a tax, since the court said it was a tax.
It's not even Obamacare, it's Obama tax. This is a tax.
Immediately, Democrats pounced. Obama campaign senior advisor David Axelrod told the Washington Post, quote, as the Republican Party and their super PACs try to depict this narrow freeloader penalty that would touch less than 1% of Americans as a broad tax on the middle class, they're sliming their own nominee. RNC Communications Director Sean Spicer awkwardly tried to square the circle yesterday.
Mitt Romney has felt the same way he's always felt. One, On day one, he'll repeal all of Obamacare. 2, that he agreed with the dissent part of the Supreme Court because he thought the entire thing was unconstitutional.
Grover Norquist, the president of Americans Tax Reform, tried to defend the Romney campaign while making it clear he does not agree.
The important thing is moving forward. Romney said he wants to abolish this and that it is an unconstitutional, whatever you want to call it. But it's clearly a tax.
Meanwhile, the Romney campaign put out a statement which tried to turn the focus back to the president. Romney spokeswoman Amanda Hannenberg told NBC News, quote, "The Supreme Court left President Obama with 2 choices. The federal individual mandate in Obamacare is either a constitutional tax or an unconstitutional penalty. Governor Romney thinks it is an unconstitutional penalty. What is President Obama's position?" Eric Fernstrom is among Romney's closest aides. He has worked for Romney for a decade and knows Romney's tenure in Massachusetts better than anyone. It's probably clear what Fernstrom was trying to do above all was try to make sure that Romney looked consistent and not inconsistent, knowing there are plenty of clips like this one from 2007 on Meet the Press that do exist.
A fee's not a tax?
If it were a tax, it'd be called a tax.
That's gimmick.
It's reality. I'm not trying to hide from the fact we raise fees. We raise fees $240 million.
And that was, of course, separate from the health care part of this, but that goes to that whole argument that Romney had back in 2007 and 2008 over how he balanced budgets in Massachusetts with increased fees. Now, the Weekly Standard's Bill Kristol argued that Romney can still talk about health care, telling Politico, quote, "You don't have to be a virgin to make the case against promiscuity." Bottom line here is what you saw Eric Fernstrom, who knows Mitt Romney well, trying to make sure Romney didn't look like a flip-flopper on this issue, walking a very narrow line. Obviously, congressional Republicans want to do this in another place. Point of fact here, I've gotten 3 releases this morning from the Romney campaign. None of them mention health care right now. They're all turning back to the issue of the economy. Finally, what do you do if attacks are working? You air more of them. And that's what the Obama campaign is doing in a new ad this morning that, again, focuses on Romney's business background.
What a president believes matters. Mitt Romney's companies were pioneers in outsourcing U.S. jobs to low-wage countries. He supports tax breaks for companies that ship jobs overseas. President Obama believes in insourcing. He fought to save the U.S. auto industry and favors tax cuts for companies that bring jobs home. Outsourcing versus insourcing. It matters.
That ad is airing in the same 9 states where the president has been advertising. The Obama campaign is spending $5.3 million on the air this week in Colorado, Florida, Iowa, North Carolina, New Hampshire, Nevada, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. Meanwhile, the Romney campaign is spending $4.8 million on broadcast television in 8 states. It's the most the campaign has shelled out on ads in any week so far in the general election. The reason for the spending spike on the Romney side look no further than the Sunshine State. Campaign is now up in Florida and spending $1.5 million on ads in just 4 cities in Florida this week alone. Ohio and Colorado round out the top places where the Romney campaign is spending. And by the way, in case you missed it, guess what state that the Romney campaign is still not advertising in, that the Obama campaign is? Pennsylvania. We're going to have more on who's spending where in about 15 minutes. I'm going to the map, folks. All right.